Welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Karker Gold, your host to this series in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis, personal response, and talking about how those chapters connect to the rest of the series. As usual, we will begin the video with a reading of the chapter we are currently on. This is chapter 47. It's gotten quiet all of a sudden, huh, Rukia? We're alone, aren't we, Rukia? What? Rukia! Ichigo! Sorry, Ichigo. Your thing will never work the same again. Chapter 47. Back to back. Tearing Sky. Bleach. Chapter 47. Back to back. Tearing Sky. Back to back? How so? You mean fighting together a Quincy and a Soul Reaper? What else? What a ridiculous idea. We're like cats and dogs. Are you still hung up on that? What? See that? Make no mistake, I shot him so you wouldn't get me. I wasn't helping you. Fine. What? It's kill or be killed. And fighting alone is tough. We have no choice. We have to help each other. Isn't survival a good enough reason to overcome our differences? I'm originally a human. I don't even know that much about Soul Reapers. It's not like I'm doing this work for the love of it, but I do want to defeat the Hollows. Why? My mother was killed by a Hollow. Now do you get it? That's reason enough by itself. But it's not the only one. It's like, I don't want anyone else to go through that. Since that Hollow killed my mother, my dad and sisters have had a rough time. I don't want anyone else to have to go through that. I don't want to see that again. So I fight them. Seeing sad faces pains me. I'm not a Superman. I can't protect everybody in the world. But I don't want to just protect the few who I can hold in my arms either. I want to protect as many people as I can. Uryu, whatever your reasons for it, this contest you challenged me to is endangering a lot of people. It was irresponsible. I won't forgive you. But now's not the time for that. There are too many of these things. It's kill or be killed. So let's kill! I'll join forces with you even though I don't want to. I'll kick your butt later. How about it? Jeez. You talk too much too, but I understand. In other words, if we don't survive this, we won't be able to fight each other. That's the idea. But I'm still gonna make you cry. Just try it if you survive. Wait, Ichigo. What is it, Uryu? These hollows are acting strange. They're all looking up at the sky, as if they're praying. Whoa! What is that? It's bigger than big. Is it a hollow too? How should I know? What are we gonna do? We can't fight that thing and this multitude of hollows. Shut up! We have no choice. Well, you were the one who said to think before you attack. You should take your own advice. This was then. That was then. This is now. We don't have time to think. Shoot. Hi. Hello. Mr. Kurosaki, we've come to help you. You're Rukia's friend, Hat and Clogs? Oh, I could breathe a little now. That is it for chapter 47. Back to back. Like Rift in the Sky? Spreading the Sky? What was it? I can't remember the subtitle. I'll get back to it. Yeah, tearing this guy. Anyway, let's talk about chapter 47, right? Let's get into the art and the narrative of this chapter, kind of what's going on visually as well as story beats. There's a little bit here. It's mostly a real visual treat, this chapter. I really like it, but we'll get there. Um, so, we return to our situation with Kon and Rukia kind of just sitting there as the rest of the fight's broken out with Ishida and Ichigo elsewhere. But Rukia decides to, of course, run over to where they are at. In the process, Kon gets grabby and gets his junk broken, which is Ichigo's junk. So it'll never work the same again. As usual, this is, our typical, kind of lead-in comedic moment. We get this a good bits to kind of break up the action, which, say what you will. I know that there are some people that absolutely hate this sort of narrative device, to where, you kind of give these releases of tension with moments of comedy, different gags, etc., or just, anything else. It kind of, it does two things, really. So one, it keeps the action from getting a little too one note, where it's like, okay, this chapter was all just action, and it's like, well, you want some variety there. If it's too much of the same thing, it will get boring. Uh, no matter what anyone says, there will be people that are dissatisfied with that, even if you have just a whole chapter of a really cool fight. If you do that too long, if you have too many back-to-back chapters that are just action and not actual dialogue or anything like that, that can wear down on people. Even if there is dialogue, it can. So it provides a little bit of a break. Also lets us, switch to other characters, so on and so forth. Spreads a little bit of levity so it doesn't get worn down. I think the shortcomings of it is that it can break a little bit of the tension that we have. So it can be a double-edged thing where one, it can build a little bit of tension where it's like, oh, I want to see where that fight's going, I want to see what happens now that Ichigo and Uryu are fighting back to back. And so you want to get back to that moment. And so there's a bit of momentum that it can build that way. But in other ways it can kind of kill that momentum. I think this is, probably the worst in the anime, in the fact that in the manga you could just read these panels real quick and then get back to the action, so it really doesn't split it up that much, whereas in the anime you have to sit with it second by second through those scenes. And even worse in the anime is that they add all this filler. And so I remember there are some filler episodes that are pretty universally reviled just because it's in the middle of really climactic fights, and then it's well, this week, instead of getting the rest of that fight, you get this filler episode. Or if you're watching an episode by episode, it's you can feel well, I just want to get back to the actual plot, what's actually happening. At least in the manga, it doesn't go okay, and here's some completely side nonsense that has nothing to do with this. But yeah, it's an issue, I think, more in the anime because, again, you have to spend more time with it, and it doesn't pace itself effectively. I think in the manga it works, at least for me, but let me know if it works for you as well, because I'm curious, how that sort of thing reads for people, because I think it definitely comes up to personal preference. I know that there are some people that kind of hate these sort of comedic interjections and wish it was just more focused on, the seriousness of the manga. But I don't know. I prefer the lighthearted stuff is there. One, because it kind of grounds it and it gives some variety in tone. But two, like I said, it kind of builds the tension more for me, if anything else. It gives it a sense of momentum, while also giving us excuse to kind of hop to these other characters. But something I did want to mention, because it is a structural thing that Kubo does a lot. It's not something that's unique to Bleach or unique to Kubotite at all, but it's certainly something that he leverages a lot, where he'll have these sort of ongoing action scenes and then intercut them with other segments to sort of, break them up in ways that work. But yeah, here this is also, if you want to kind of think of it as also trying to have your action be contiguous, you're gonna have to split it up with the chapter cover unless you start with a chapter cover, right? So I think this works really well for like Rukia coming back, realizing what the situation is. Just like if you were reading this weekly or even chapter by chapter, right? You're brought back into it by Rukia getting brought back into it. And I really love this transition to chapter cover because she of course sees the big maw in the sky and all the hollows and everything, but instead of us seeing that, we just get this chapter cover, which is fantastic. One of my favorite spreads so far, which is Ichigo and Ishida Uryu all surround like back to back, surrounded by these hollows. It's very good. We get some really cool hollow designs. Like, look at this boy. It's like Hexapodus on steroids or something. And what's going on with this guy? His little tiny arms, like in his little toes. But like, menacing. I like all these mask designs a lot. Um, yeah, this thing's got like some big tongue. Just really Kubo flexing a lot of his monster design. I think, honestly, I would love to see Kubo do more stuff with like different outfits and fashion and more stuff with monsters. Anyway, as we go forward, of course, we come back to the actual situation that we were in, right? Where Ichigo is proposing fighting back to back. I talked about it last time, but one of the things that I like about Ichigo is that he's able to kind of have this connection with other characters, right? And that he's able to kind of resonate with these other people, even antagonists of his. And so a lot of that resonance that we were reading earlier, that we could kind of get implicitly because we know all this stuff about Ichigo, gets voiced, which I like because it can be really easy to conflate what you know and what the characters know. Like, for instance, we know Ichigo's whole past, but Ishida doesn't, right? And similarly, like, that's one of the things that I have to kind of constantly play back and forth in my mind. Is like, what do certain characters know? What information are they sharing with each other, and like for what purpose? But then also, are they lying to others? Like, why are they sharing? Stuff like that. Where it gets muddled is especially, like I said, whenever characters are lying or misleading or only sharing a little bit of the truth. Um, that can be, difficult to parse, especially with characters like, Orihime, who might hide a lot of things, or like with Kisuke, who's such a mysterious guy and only kind of tells people, what he needs to for the situation, which is very similar to Rukia, where, we at least can take Rukia as an authority on a lot of the things that she says and take it for fact, but she also hides a lot of stuff too. She only tells Ichigo what was really needed at any time. So there's a lot of that going on too. The way in which the characters parse the information and that information gets shared between characters as well as with us is pretty significant. And I think Bleach tends to have a good handle on it, though. Because Bleach has a good handle on it, it can be at times redundant for us because a character is telling another character something that we already know. So it's like, oh well, I know that. Why doesn't that other person know that? And it's like, oh yeah, because of course they don't. Um, or alternatively, there can be moments where if you don't realize a character's lying or holding something back or kind of misrepresenting the truth, that can maybe affect your understanding of what's even going on in the manga. And I think a lot of people that have misconceptions about Bleach are ones that kind of read through it real quickly, like what we saw earlier with all the Urahara telling um, you know, talking about the powers that Orihime and Chad developed. I think a lot of people took away from that scene in a lot of different ways because they didn't really think about exactly the information that was being presented and how it was being presented and why. But it is what it is. It's a kind of important thing to pay attention to. Is anytime that characters kind of share what they know. Uh, yeah, but here again, we get all these cool hollows kind of lurking around the corners here. I love this, and the action of these two pages is fantastic. I love, Ichigo hopping over Uryu to attack split this hollow's face in half, and then as this other hollow lunges for them with Ichigo's back turned to him, Uryu then gets him with the arrow. Looking especially young here, actually. This is kind of the youngest that I think Uryu's looked in any of these panels. Typically, he looks a little bit more slender and maybe mature, but his face has a bit of more roundness to it, especially here at the chin and the cheeks, and just kind of like a large rounded head, which So, kind of visual shorthand, if you want to make a character look younger, then give their features more roundness and make their head larger. Because typically, children have larger heads with kind of rounded features, like softer features. Um, Same thing goes for women, which can be, yeah, oof, it can run real rough whenever you want to really present a character as very feminine, because you also, a lot of the same kind of traits that are associated with feminine traits tend to be childlike traits, which is a whole can of worms. But, that's our society. Welcome to the patriarchy. Not even a patriarchy. Welcome to some weird pederast shit. Anyway, the whole point is that whenever you're depicting these characters, you have to kind of be cognizant of what you're trying to evoke. And so, I think if you want to make these characters look younger, I think that's a very intentional stylistic choice. I don't know how much Kubo was going for that here, if he was specifically trying to make Uryu look kind of a little younger, a little less kind of masculine, perhaps. It's a cool moment for him, but I think the idea is that Ichigo is supposed to be really the one taking the lead here. And yeah, if you want to present characters as more kind of adult or masculine, you give them sharper features, a more like a smaller, kind of more elongated face, so on and so forth. The bigger forehead is often typically like a more childhood sort of trait. But yeah, you can certainly see that in the way these characters are depicted. I do like Ichigo's strong jawline here. It's good stuff. But overall, I think the art in this chapter is pretty good. Lots of nice use of these characters. I really love Ichigo's expressions throughout this. Lots of like, hell yeah, we're gonna fight together. Um, of course, he shares that his mother was killed by a hollow. Obviously, that's significant information that we knew, but then not necessarily. I don't really know what's going on here. I guess the idea is to imply like these hollows are kind of like moving around. But this sort of fuzziness doesn't really work for me. It looks too sketchy, too messy, really. Especially this line here where we could really see the line that was drawn for an outline, and then it's just got these sketches over it. Uh, I don't know. It doesn't work whenever there's so much else that's like really clean in this whole chapter, really. But I mean, you'll see places where the shading gets a bit sketchy here too. Like if we look at this hollow here, like how we have lines that kind of they don't quite work. Some of them go outside of the actual body of the hollow, like that one there and one over here. So I it's not quite there exactly. It's a bit of a rougher panel, especially for those, but there is a lot of kind of clean line work, especially for the characters. And I think that's the point: is the focus is more on the characters than exactly the hollows. Um, yeah, but I like that. We do get this kind of really cool moment from Ichigo. I do like the way that the shading gets used on the characters' faces, especially to give the detail and contour of Ichigo's jawline here and like his neck. I think that works pretty effectively. It's maybe not as clean as I like to be, but you can also see I like that like the lines get kind of thicker inside this region and then thin out, interspersedly. Like that's so if you want to do shading and especially like this kind of hatch shading, the closer that you put your lines together, obviously the darker an area is going to look like at a glance. I don't know, but I do like Kubo's shading techniques. I think they're kind of interesting and unique in a lot of ways, at least for other mangaka. It's a neat style, not something that you always see, but I think it lends the manga a bit of I don't know, an artistic quality that you don't always see elsewhere. It's not exactly realistic. It's meant to be kind of to a degree. I think sketchier are more kind of comic like, but it really works for me. And I think there's a lot of places where it's really subtly used, like especially here in Ichigo's brow. It's really easy to miss, but it definitely sells his expression in a way that not having it wouldn't. So yeah, it's just really smart use of the shading, I think. even if it's not always the cleanest here and there. And that's something that throughout the series would become more refined, cleaner, and more effective. But it's something that I want to note here. But yeah, we get reiteration of Ichigo's whole MO, right? That he's protecting people because he doesn't want them to have to go through that. Not just these people that he's close to, but anybody, right? I like that, of course. Not only does I like that, it takes Uryu to be like, "Oh my, you had someone close to you die to a hollow," for him to realize that like what he's doing is stupid, and that also Ichigo can relate with him. But then, furthermore, Ichigo specifically, like, even not even realizing it, says this thing that really kind of resonates with Uryu, and then he says he doesn't want to see that again, just as you know the idea of seeing people be sad, right? Uh, right, that they had a rough time, and his family had these sad faces, and he doesn't want to see that again. And so it's like, oh well, seeing sad faces is what pained his grandfather. And so Ryu has this moment where he finally kind of considers Ichigo to be literally and figuratively more human. So it's cool that we get that from Ichigo turn like towards Uryu. That like Ichigo seeing Ryu is more of like a kind of peer and all of that, but also we get a lot of that from Ishida as well, which is cool. Um, yeah. So it's also neat that I love that Ichigo this face is great because it for me expresses like that Ichigo has a little bit of frustration about this, that like it's not exactly the conclusion that he would have normally come to, right? He wants to protect the people that he can, um, but he's realized that he can't. He doesn't just want to protect the people that are like literally the people that he's got connections with, but as many people as he can. And that's maybe something that he's just kind of thought through here. I don't know that he's expressed it before, because whenever we've gotten Ichigo expressing his motivations in the past, it's been like, okay, I want to get stronger. I want to fight these hollows and become strong enough to defeat Grand Fisher next time I run into him, right? And then before that, it was, okay, well, I want to protect my family. So this is finally, we get a little bit of, you know, as much as we could have understood this from Ichigo, from his actions, we certainly now get it voiced by him. So he's really expressing his actual desire, which is cool. It not just reiterates everything that we've had in Ichigo's journey so far, because essentially here Ichigo is talking about his entire journey so far, like his mother dying to a hollow, him fighting the hollows, his doing all these struggles, his issue with like not being able to protect everybody and not just doing this because it's a job, but because it's like a passion of his. So it's kind of neat. Um, I also, of course, I've been calling out Uryu on how irresponsible it was to use the hollow bait, and so of course I love this moment for where Ichigo calls him out on it too. And I think that's another great thing is like having a protagonist that can speak towards these injustices, especially if you feel like they aren't being spoken to otherwise or aren't being addressed. It gives you a good moment of catharsis where you're like, yes, call that shit out, fucking get him, Ichigo. But I love that Ichigo calls that out and is like, you're an asshole, I'm gonna whoop your ass, but like after. And it's a beautiful moment that these two come to that really kind of sells like this kind of cool rivalry but ally moment. um I do, of course, yeah, like, Ichigo's expression here doesn't work as much for me, but here I think it works pretty well, and especially like Iryu kind of having a realization that, yeah, this is maybe a thing that he did was irresponsible, and it is endangering a lot of people. So I think Ichigo's absolutely in the right here. Um, yeah, also nice close in on him, real close of his brow, Ichigo being pretty serious in this moment. It's got good serious faces. And then I love, we've got this really pulled in close expression on Ichigo, very serious, and then surprised as, this arrow flies past him, this shot. Um, and of course slams right into the hollow. And I like how it's like a slap at Ichigo's cheek almost, but also strikes the hollow. And then really cool moment for Ishida because it's like, man, Ichigo just served up Ishida on a platter, but Ishida does come back with, I think, a bit of dialogue that I really like, in that he, because he's got this resonance with Ichigo now, and because Ichigo is like our likable protagonist, seeing Ishida kind of use and reappropriate the language that Ichigo used, like where Ichigo was like, "Geez, you talk too much," right? He kicked him in the head. Uh, Here we have Ishida saying the same thing, right? You talk too much, right? He's giving it back to Ichigo for kind of lecturing him about, the same sort of thing, right? Where Ichigo's talking about his background and, the reason why he fights and all this stuff. So it's kind of funny, how much whenever Ichigo says it, it's like it feels a lot more triumphant than whenever Ishida says it. It helps that Ichigo's our protagonist and that his motivations are, like kind of sound and just, whereas we talked about how Ishida's motivations in the previous chapter felt a little like immature, or conflated a few different things that they shouldn't be, like his hatred for Soul Reapers being grown out of them not they didn't really kill his grandfather, so on and so forth, that he is endangering all these people, that like him doing this whole contest is like really petty and self involved. So yeah, it's neat that also, he kind of cops to that. Uh, and then, this is a kind of great moment. We get a little bit of a smirk from him as he expresses, "Yeah, we won't be able to fight each other if we don't survive," which is a kind of cool, you know, like, yeah, I agree with you, but I'm still going to be standoffish and cool about it. And Ichigo getting this big kind of toothy, befanged sort of, yeah, that's the idea. Also, very kind of iconic look of Ishida aiming the bow and Ichigo with his sword rushing to the other side of him. This back-to-back look is fantastic stuff and kind of peak early Bleach. And of course, we're back to being surrounded by hollows. See, this foregrounding of these hollows works way better for me than the kind of blurry one before. But yeah, we do get all the hollows, and it seems like they're praying. They're making this like, oh, like noise. It's terrifying as the sky finally cracks open. All of those fissures have drawn together, and their true enemy arrives. Right, this huge monstrosity of a hollow that tears itself out of the sky, which it's got a kind of a wild design. It's really, really big nose. We'll see more of it in the oncoming chapters. But yeah, like this ultimate kind of giant's hollow obviously creates a kind of final boss for them. Also gives a good reason for all these hollows to be distracted for a moment. I like this back and forth that they have, where again, this is sort of like a comedic bit where the hollows here are foregrounded in the same way that we usually get the characters foregrounded, kind of comedically, as this descends into chaos, which I think this kind of really works because we have the structure of the straight paneling, and then it becomes angled as it becomes a little bit more chaotic of them arguing about the strategy that they should take, and that they don't have time to think, and then they've got to fight these hollows, and it's like, okay, well, what's going to happen? They have the masses to fight, as well as this much new larger enemy, and then they all get eradicated by gunfire. And you have to wonder, of course, who it is, and immediately you can tell because of before you even get to that bottom panel, which is fantastic. Quiet Ururu just murdered a bunch of hollows with apparently a chain gun or like shoulder mounted missile launcher thing. But we've seen this weapon a couple times before, right? All the different talismans that were on it, all these seals. So it's immediately recognizable just from this panel alone, which I love. I love the way that this is drawn with like the completely black, the smoke coming out, and then getting just the impression of what's behind it, as well as the rifling of it. Really, really cool. Very neat weapon. Not what you might have expected underneath there, which is pretty neat. But also not what you expect from Ururu here either. Really cool moment, and they're both rightfully shocked by it. But of course, Kisuke has arrived with the whole gang to save the day. Um, so that's kind of neat, right? We finally get a little bit of payoff because Kisuke and gang rolled out before and then didn't really get to do very much whenever it came to Kon. So here we get some payoff for that we had before. And of course, Kon is still on the ground in pain, as he is. But yeah, all in all, I do like the chapter a lot. I think we get a bunch of cool depictions of these characters. I like that Jinza looks a little miffed, like he's not happy to be here and fight Hollows, not have to be cleaning up around the shop. Come on. Maybe he's upset that Ururu got to kill all those Hollows and he didn't. Who knows? But clearly, whatever's going on here with all the Kisuke and his allies, they are a fighting force to be reckoned with. But yeah, speaking of the chapter as a whole, I really do like it. There's a lot of fantastic art this chapter, a lot of really cool and effective sequences. Like I love so much like this back to back, one page fighting the one hollow, one page fighting the other, and Ichigo being like, "See," and it's such a great moment of Ichigo, who's our protagonist, like confirming what we're feeling. Like that was cool, right? This is great. Like let's fight. Let's see them fight together and fight all these hollows. It's exciting. And so that not only further aligns us with Ichigo, but does a very good job of just kind of selling this action as cool. I mean, it is, but it's a way to get the character involved in that too. I also like these close-ups of Ishida, especially here where there isn't the outline of his face or the stylistic kind of use of the page, and we just get the shot of his eyes. Him reacting pretty quickly. I think that's really, really, really well done. Um, I also one thing that I kind of love here is that we get the side of the glass frame, like the thickness of them. Uh, yeah, just really, really effective sort of angling in a lot of ways. Perspective. It's cool stuff. Anyway, all in all, yeah, great chapter. Probably one of my favorites so far out of this entire arc. Uh, there are a lot of really cool character moments, obviously, like Chad and or Hime both getting their cool powers. But I mean, out of this entire Ishida and Uryu back and forth, I think this chapter is finally, where it's paid off for me, where everything that's been building between the two of them has finally come to a really satisfying conclusion. I think more so than Ishida fighting Uryu or Uryu, whatever he could have been doing, any sort of other outcome. I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine an outcome that is as satisfying as this one, given the elements that we had going in. So, you know, good stuff. I think that's always the thing that I'm kind of critical of, and I have to watch myself because I am pretty familiar with writing and with fiction, especially. I've spent a long time writing my own work as well as literally like several years of education and postgraduate education in fiction, and it's always the saddest thing whenever you like watch a movie and read a series and it's like, oh well, that could have been done better, like if they just did this and this and this. And like a little bit of it's, you have to be critical of yourself because it's like, well, it's easy to criticize a thing that's already done. You don't know the process that got them there and like the strengths of it. But there are always moments where, and I'm not just talking about plot holes, but I'm talking about like where you can really see the elements of the thing that are at play, and you can see how they could come together better. Um, it's almost like if somebody served you like a piece of bread with I guess I'm trying to think of like a really simple thing that you could mess up. Maybe it's like if somebody served you like a pizza that was sort of disassembled, if that makes sense. Like they gave you like a cup of sauce, a cup of, hot kind of melty cheese, and mixed in like toppings, I suppose, like pepperoni or whatever, and then they gave you like breadsticks. It's like, yeah, sure, I can kind of dip and bite, but like if you just put this all together and made a pizza out of it, that's probably a way better dish, right? Food analogy, got food metaphor is always the lamest metaphor. Sorry for that, folks. Um, but whenever you can see the constituent parts of a story and then they don't come together in as satisfying a way, I think that's maybe a bigger letdown than if a story is just outright bad for me, because something having potential and failing to kind of actualize that potential, it always kind of sucks. I think maybe that's one of the things that I like about Bleach, is that it feels like in a lot of ways it does actualize its potential. There are certainly times whenever you are let down, especially when it comes to certain characters or certain battles. I think some things could be handled better. As we'll go throughout the series, I will try to highlight those, and maybe what I would have done differently. This is why this is personal response moment here. But I wouldn't have changed really anything about this. I really think that we get very strong character moments from Ichigo and Uryu, even if, like I said, he gets painted in a bit of a immature and negative light. The whole point is to kind of juxtapose him to Ichigo, to find their similarities, to see their differences, and to see them fight alongside each other and recognize each other as, valuable allies. So it's stuff that I all like. It's a good chapter. I think the art, especially, not just in terms of its quality, because like I did say, there were a few moments where I was like, "What's really going on in these panels?" Uh, but as far as sequencing and like really leveraging the manga itself as a medium, I think it does that super well and really does a lot to use kind of the way that we read manga to build these moments, both of exciting action, but also these character moments too. So fantastic use of form, which I always like to see. I'm really big on your form really being leveraged to tell your story. So, if you have whatever story you want to tell, and it doesn't even really matter story wise, like whatever idea you want to present it in a form that complements your idea. You want to be able to make use of the strengths of the media itself. And whenever I say the media, I mean like the medium that it is in, that is in. Ugh, it is in. Butchered that. Anyway, so there's a lot of things that are done here that work in a visual way that wouldn't have worked in, let's say, like just text. And also, there's a lot here that works with the way that a manga is set up specifically that wouldn't work so much in an animated thing, even, or in a movie. So yeah, it's kind of like, there's strengths to the form that I think Kubo is very purposefully leveraging and using. Moments like the ones that I highlighted, like even on this page with like, Rukia heading up here, having that reaction, and then us turning to a chapter cover that shows us the kind of situation that she's reacting to. And then also, if we were to consider it as the thing in the sky, the giant hollets arrived, then, it builds even further tension. So like, that's something that you wouldn't get otherwise. You could probably emulate that in, a movie, but it wouldn't have the same punchiness that this does. It wouldn't have the same sort of genre significance, and it wouldn't work as well. I mean, you don't have the same sense of turning a page whenever you're watching a show. Moments like this, like the Bleach anime does do its best to kind of do still frame, really powerful kind of singular shots that it holds on to emulate these moments in the manga. But moments like this can't be as, just like very strong, stand on their own, moments that you could spend as much time as you want with, and then move from an effective pacing and then build this action as strongly as this does, and then turn page into this shattering, like, and this whole like see that moment with Ichigo that we talked about, like that's something that only really works in this medium. And so I think that's why I love this chapter. I think this chapter is fantastic as a chapter of manga, not just as a chapter of Bleach. It's really making the most of that. And I think that's one thing I want to kind of talk about for a second here is that there are people that are very much of the mind like, oh, I'll just watch the anime, right? They're like, I don't care to read the series, reading, right? I'll watch the show, and I always have issues with that, because as much as an anime can really highlight and do really cool things with a series, I think there are some anime that I prefer even to the original because they have an effectiveness of how they use the anime form the manga couldn't, right? So the basically the thing that was written works better as an anime, and the anime leverages the strengths of its medium stronger than the manga does. But in general, manga are written because it's a medium to tell the story, and they're using that medium effectively, and you lose a bit of that with anime. Um, I can talk about some series that really work for me in that regard, and I can talk about ones that don't. I mean, we already talked about with Bleach, like having to have those filler episodes that break up the tension. That sucks. I also think that like a lot of the later fights in Bleach, especially, can feel like they drag for eons because you have to sit with the whole episode as they go through all this. Whenever a character explains something in the manga, you read the panel in like 5 seconds and you're done with it. It doesn't have to be a 2 minute diatribe. So like I think the anime, as much as I like the anime for Bleach, I think the strengths of the Bleach anime, especially in the first 3 seasons, are in that it really does touch up a lot of the visuals in ways that we didn't see in the manga. So it builds these really effective animated sequences. Um, but then also like for instance, I love to give an example that we've already come across in the first chapter, whenever Ichigo breaks the spell that Rukia put on him, that works for me way better in the anime than it does in the manga. I think in the manga it doesn't read quite as well, and it's not as cool of a moment as it is in the show. And similarly, the anime has the strength of using actual voice acting, so you can emote these characters a little bit better. So if that's not coming across in your series, you can get that through voice acting. Same thing. The soundtrack for the anime is fantastic. Shiro Sugisu did great work. Glad that he's back for the the revival for the series. But like so much of the soundtrack for Bleach really sells this mood. That said, like I said, there are those weaknesses where in these longer fights they tend to drag, especially, and it can really feel like a slog at times. And these interspersed comedy moments aren't quick and punchy. It's not like whenever we spend one page here with Kon and Rukia doing all of the shenanigans, like that's no problem. We can get through that in like 10 seconds. We can get back to the rest of the chapter. In the anime, this moment might take upwards of like a minute or two. It's a significant back and forth. Like it's even if it's even a 30-second gag bit, like that's more time that you're sitting there having to spend with it rather than with the manga where it's at your leisure. But even that can be leveraged effectively if done right. If you look to the anime for Kaiji, for instance, Kaiji's all about these very tense gambles. And so in the manga, whenever you're feeling that tension, it can like kind of build your momentum to read the pages quicker. But in the anime, you're stuck sitting and stewing with it. And I think it works in Kaiji's anime in a lot of places, but if you look to the second season of Kaiji, especially the second half, for the pachinko game, you could see where that really, it worked in the manga because it was so long-winded, and maybe you kind of stew with it in the manga, but to go through all those same paces in the anime makes it really feel like you're just stuck in this quagmire of having to sit here through, God, they're still doing this, and it loses the tension and it just becomes tedium. Um, so like there's strengths and weaknesses to it, right? Your medium can be used to different ways, or to different modes. I think you look no further than something like One Punch Man, which works really really well in its manga, and the anime is essentially just a straight adaptation of that, and it's fine. But look at something like Bakuman, where it's very much about manga and the visual style of manga, and it's very dialogue heavy, and the anime doesn't add anything. In fact, I think it's a worse product altogether. Um, but then you have other ones that are kind of unique, and I think add something different not necessarily better, but different. So if you look to one of my favorite slice of life series, Beck, which is about like it's a coming of age story about a kid, becoming a musician, right? Um, in the manga, you obviously can't hear any of the music, so you have to just accept like this kid has a very great voice. You can imagine what he sings like. In the show, they actually have all the songs recorded. So you're not given that benefit of the doubt. You can actually pass judgment on the quality of the singing. So it's less like, oh, he has such a heavenly voice, and more just like, oh, this is just a unique and interesting sound. But at the same part, I love the music in the show, and there's some really great songs there that like really resonated with me, and I love listening to them now because like I can reflect on, I have this emotional connection from the song being like a significant part of the show and like how it was used within the show. So yeah, it's neat. I think I'd give one last example of anime versus manga, the medium working, in different ways. If you look at comedy series, especially, a lot of the voice acting can really sell those moments, and so I think of something like, you know, uh, trying to think of a couple different ones. The first one that came to mind is like Cromartie High School, where I think the jokes and the gags maybe work quicker for me in the anime because I can immediately recognize like what the characters are saying or whatever and get their intonation, and that kind of sells the comedy a lot more for me. But reading it is also a quicker pace, so I don't know. It varies, Obviously, it really depends. But I think the important thing is that you shouldn't always consider the anime to be better than the manga. Is my point. And I think the manga is really important to read for whatever series, especially if it's the way that it was originally written, because the manga for a series is going to be the way that the author intended it to be consumed. If they wanted to just straight up make an anime, then if were they capable, they would pitch it to a committee, something like Code Geass, where that's an anime original. It started with its anime, and then it got all the other adaptations. And then, if you just wanted something to be like a novel, you would just write a novel. But if you're making manga, you're specifically trying to leverage the form of that. I also just realized that Rukia's shoe here is ridiculous looking. What's going on with that? what's going on with your foot, Rukia? Doesn't quite work perspective wise for me. I don't know. Anyway, can talk about like stories and the medium and how to write stories and effective writing and all of that all day. Talk to me in the comments if you want to talk to me in the comments about it. But point is, this is a fantastic chapter. I love it. Big response there, but whenever I get sidetracked, I do get sidetracked. I want to apologize. That's what you're here for, maybe. You can also tell whenever I get passionate about a thing, I talk a lot faster. I pitch up and I get really into it. Whereas whenever I'm just chill, I just talk like this. I have a much slower cadence to my voice. I think if I didn't speak faster, then these videos would be real long, wouldn't they? Even longer than they are. Let's focus on making them shorter and get into talking about the spoilers for this one. So, the ways in which this chapter connects to the rest, right? Obviously, his thing will work the same again. He has children. Rukia didn't mess him up forever. Though it would really be funny if it was like, Rukia had a kid, but Ichigo didn't. It was like, well, Khan abused my body too much. That would be a weird gag, but I don't know. I'd respect it more in this reread. Maybe it's because Ichigo spent so much time in the Dangai that he was able to get his junk to work again. Who knows? Maybe that's the real purpose of the full Ring arc, is to give his power its junk once again. Anyway, let's actually talk about real connections here. Obviously, Quincy and Soul Reaper, ha ha har har, because Ichigo is a Quincy too. We know that. Kind of neat is that we wouldn't really see Ichigo and Uryu ever fight back to back again, would we? They always get split up. You know, as much as they team up, it's like whenever they get to Soul Society, they get split up, and then they don't get to team up again for that arc. And then whenever they get to Hueco Mundo, they split up, and they don't get to get back together for that arc. And then in the Lost Agent arc, Ishida gets taken out of the picture pretty quickly, and so they don't get to fight back to back in that. And then in Housing Your Blood War, Ishida joins the other side, and even though he's double crossing them, he doesn't really fight back to back with Ichigo for the entirety of that. So this is unfortunately the last time that we would see them fight back to back. And it's a shame because I think that this is a really cool element of them being kind of working together. And I don't know. I wish we got more fights like this in Bleach, is what I'm saying. Either against a bunch of enemies, like goons, and then maybe it's harder to do whenever you get to Soul Society and you have so many named characters being your antagonists, and so you don't want to dispatch them in quite the same way. But I don't know. More of this teamwork stuff would have been really neat to get. I think the bigger takeaway is obviously Ichigo being able to rally people to his side, right? But we talked plenty about that last time. I do like Ichigo insists that, like, I'm originally a human. Kind of, obviously is originally a Quincy. Talks about his mother, all that good stuff. I was talking about earlier whenever they were talking about Ichigo's speed and how fast he was. Obviously tied to his Bankai being speed and that being like one of his bigger strengths. But only gets brought up really in the fight with Byakuya. I don't know that we get a lot of. That's one of the things that I'll have to pay attention to a lot as we go forward in the series, because I always felt a little bit let down by the fact that, like, the big reveal of, okay, we have all these cool Bankai and they all have these really cool techniques, and so it's like, well, Ichigo's, what does yours do? It's like, well, it condenses my sword and I get real fast. It's like, oh, cool. Are you ever gonna, like, outspeed an opponent after that? And it's like, well, maybe not. He does get to grab a lot of people by the face. It's kind of cool. Interested to get to the face grabbing. Yeah. Ichigo's whole protect as many people as he can. Obviously, that's why he starts fighting these larger antagonists like Aizen or like Yuha, because that's the way that he can protect the most people, right? So it's kind of cool that, as much as he has this personal connection to the fight with Aizen, at least to, saving Orihime, but especially to Yuha, Bak, Yahweh, whatever you want to call him. I like that those kind of conflicts grow out of Ichigo having this larger kind of, I want to protect as many people as I can moment. Also like that, he won't forgive Ishida. I don't know that Ishida really engages a lot of people with his behavior elsewhere in the manga, but I'm pretty sure. So he ends up being the apotheosis. I'm trying to think of ways in which Ishida's what is it? It's not called your Sternritter. It's your Shrift, right? His Shrift. I'm wondering if Ishida's Shrift really is reflected in these early things. I mean, I could certainly see him being the antithesis to Ichigo in a lot of ways. Right, that's right. Isn't he the antithesis or the apotheosis, something like that? I think it's antithesis, the opposite of, right? And he can. Boy, it's. I'm having a hard time remembering. I keep thinking of Bleach Brave Souls, where he sends back the enemy's status elements, but I think that's kind of how it worked in the series as well. Is that he could kind of render everything upon him onto somebody else. Which then I'm like, wait, didn't the balance do that though? Gotta remember exactly how it went. Yeah, I don't know that they ever do actually fight each other, but yeah. Anyway, kind of interesting the idea of the Hollows praying, as we know that they are all prey literally for the Minas Grande. The Venus Grande design I think is cool, but it looks so doofy in the anime in ways. I don't know. It works way better as a manga design for me. Uh, I think it's because in the manga they can really like sell its sense of scale and the way it looks without it just looking kind of silly. Um, I don't know that we have a lot of other connections other than obviously we get to see Uru's use of this weapon. As we know, Uru is this modified soul and, is essentially an artificial uh, weapon lady girl, much in the same way that Nemu is, I assume. But it's cool that we finally get to see use of that weapon. I don't know that she would use it again against Ilfort. I think she just goes into her berserk mode. But neat that we actually get Ururu as a combatant here to highlight that. Not that, it wasn't already kind of made explicit by last time whenever she was with Urahara, and they, were all kind of sorting out. Urahara showing up kind of late to the party is something that would come up a couple more times, so it's neat that that does get set up here. I mean, that already happened earlier with the situation with Kon, where, like, Ichigo and Ruki kind of got it over control, and then Urahara showed up. Like, I don't think it was Urahara, you know, like intending not intending to show up late and just happening to show up late. I think his intention was to specifically show up whenever he did. I don't know. I always read Urahara as a very purposeful character. I was thinking about the other episode where he was talking about how these characters develop this power from Ichigo, but he would know the Hyogekyo is inside of Rukia. At this point, I don't know if it's clear if Urahara knows the Hogekyo, um, is this wish fulfillment sphere, but he does know it breaks down the barrier between Soul Reapers and Hollows, and so I gotta imagine that he could still attribute the powers of both Chad and Orihime to the Hogekyo. I think that Urahara certainly would be aware of that. I don't know. We'll have to wait until, Deicide to get confirmation one way or the other, wouldn't we? Um, because I do not remember if it was made explicit whether or not Urahara even knew that, or if Aizen believed that Urahara didn't know, but maybe Urahara did. Clearly, I think whenever Urahara was originally working with the Higekio and was using it as like kind of this breakdown sphere and was doing everything, experimenting with the Vizard or whatever. I say experimenting with the Vizard. He was experimenting with it and then he had to use it with the Vizard to stabilize their condition, I believe. Something like that. Yeah, it's been a while. Anyway, I think at that time he was under the impression that that's what it did. But I think since then, especially since hiding it in Rukia and inside of her Kanpaku, I certainly believe that he's realized its true nature. Um, I've got to read it that way. As far as like what the actual because there's the idea of like, well, maybe it can't manifest people's desires if it's not a complete Hogekyo, which is we know that's not true because it manifested Chad and Orihime's as much as Aizen says that outright. I think the idea of it being a complete Hogekyo is the fact that it can actually like, fuse with somebody and fully manifest their will in the way that it did with Aizen at the end. But that's besides the point. That's not neither here nor there. Here we just have more Urahara showing up late to the party to kind of save the day, or to move things along in the way that he wants, one way or the other. Yeah, schemer. He's the schemer. But there's not much else that I had to really say about this chapter. There aren't a lot of other huge connections that I can draw of stuff that gets brought up here that really significantly plays out. Because I can't really see any other structural parallels other than the stuff with Urahara showing up after their fight, and obviously Ichigo kind of rallying these allies to him to fight this larger threat. But that's all stuff we covered before, you know? It's just iterating on those structures that we've seen before, and of course, we will continue to see again. I will say that whenever I scrolled down and I couldn't see that this was a text bubble, Jinx's hair looked like it was, kind of just messed up there. I think that's kind of funny. That's all I got for this one, folks. That's it. This has been Carker Gold. As always, Bleach Revisited. I keep pulling up the top of my manga reader here. But never forget, spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.